As we move into 4-6, it's important that you realize tomorrow will be a lot better. Today we're going to teach you, or actually just remind you from Algebra 1, how to complete the square. Tomorrow we're going to use the quadratic formula that takes care of the same problem, and most kids find that a lot easier. So just make it through today, and I promise I won't. If you don't like it, you don't really have to use it again after today and tomorrow when we do our classwork. All right, there are two types of problems today. The first one is, what are we going to do if there's no bx or no middle term? You're going to like these ones. These ones are pretty easy. And then the second type today is going to be, how do you complete the square? You have to complete the square right now. This is useful if it doesn't factor. In 4-5, you learned how to solve by factoring, so now you're going to learn how to solve if it doesn't factor. So let's start at part 1, what to do if there is no middle or bx term. Step 1, take the constant to the other side. So we need to take away 10. We got to isolate x squared. So we get 4x squared equals 46 minus 10 is 36. That was pretty easy. Now divide each side by 4. I'm going to turn off this light. That looks better. Divide each side by 4, and you get x squared equals 9. You finally isolated the x squared. Now it's time to take the square root of both sides. X is going to equal what most students think is just 3. But remember, if you need to say, what can I plug in for x to get a positive 9? So not only a positive 3, but a negative 3 as well. So when you take a square root of a number, if you're setting it, if it's x squared equals, you must use plus or minus so you get two answers. So in other words, you can plug a positive or a negative 3 on the left, and you'll get 46 out. Now, part B is not quite as nice. We did a nice little problem. Now it's time to do something back from Algebra 1 that you need to remember. And now I'm going to bring in my perfect square sheet. Okay, same first step. Add the 10 to the other side. We're isolating x squared. So you get 3x squared equals 120. You're going to divide each side by 3. This is not new. This is still the same steps as the previous problem. You will get 40. You're also going to take the square root. Now in Algebra 2, we do not use decimals anymore. You can take the square root of 40 and get a decimal, but I will not count it as full credit. You need to be able to remember how to reduce your square roots. In order to do that, you need to think about your perfect squares. All of these numbers between the lines, and all of these numbers between the lines. Now, what of these numbers goes into 40, and you need the biggest one? So does 16 go into 40? No, it does not. Does 9 go into 40? No, it does not. Does 4 go into 40? Yes, it does. So we need to think of 40 as being 4 times, well, 4 times what? 4 times 10 is 40. Now that we've done that, it's time to simplify our square root. You take the square root of 4 and you get 2. So in other words, we're doing the square root of 4 times 10 now. There is no square root of 10, so it stays inside. This is a very quick review from Algebra 1. You use a plus and a minus because both a positive and a negative are your solutions. So that's how you solve by using square roots when there's no bx term. Don't forget, this might need to be something we review together. We're going to try that one more time on a word problem. When designing a house, an architect used the windows that look like this one shown here. What is the dimension of the window if it has a square area? So we'll just talk about this square area right there. I'm gonna ignore the top part, and we're just gonna do this particular part down here, okay? Let's do the area of the square window, or the rectangular window. We know area equals length times width. They are telling us that the area is 2766. We know the length to be x, we know the width to be 2x, or vice versa. So we're filling in for length and we're filling in for width. Let's multiply those together. X times 2x is 2x squared. Now just like we did on the front, we're going to divide by 2. We get 1,383. And now we take the square root. With word problems, I will allow you to use a decimal. So I will not make you use these numbers here. With a word problem, you may use a decimal. And we're not going to use plus or minus because there's no way that we don't live in a black hole, so no negatives whenever we talk about dimensions. It does not ask us to round to anything. So I'm going to write that x equals, on my calculator, I hope you saw it said 37.2 when I round. And there it is. So that is one dimension of the window. The other dimension was the 2x. So you just multiply your answer by 2. So we have 37.2. So when I multiply 37.2 times 2, I get 74.4. Which means the dimensions are 37.2, what are we in, inches? And 74.4 inches. All right, so that was used by taking the square root. Decimals are okay in word problems. All right, now this is where the majority of the lesson is going to land. It's how to complete the square. I will go through this as fast and as painless as I can. This again is useful if it doesn't factor. If a problem factors, please feel free to factor it, or you can still complete the square if you decide that you like this. We're not going to solve yet, we're just going to get it ready. In problem number 4, they're saying you have x squared minus 10x, and they want to know what value would you need back here so that you can complete the square. Well, I will teach you. You take 1/2 of this b value, so 1/2 of negative 10, and you square that answer. So 1/2 of negative 10 is negative 5. You square that answer to get a positive 25. So in order to complete this as a perfect square, you would need to add 25 to it. Now you might be wondering, okay, why? How does that complete a square? I don't understand. Well, whether you chose the box method or the grouping method, or you factor by guess and check, or however you factor, if you were to factor this trinomial, when you factor this trinomial, you would get, and you can trust me or you can do it on your own, you would get x minus 5 and x minus 5. So you might say, well, how is that a perfect square? Because if you have x minus 5 twice, you have a perfect squared binomial. So we had to figure out what is this back number so that when we factor it, it becomes a perfect square. Let's try that one more time. X squared plus 6x and what value? Follow my steps. You do 1/2 times 6, the middle value, and you're going to square it. So that ends up being 3 squared, which is 9. 9 is the magic number that you have to add here in order to have a perfect square. So why is it a perfect square? Because if you were to factor this trinomial, it would factor to, you can use the box or grouping or however you factor, it would factor to x plus 3 and x plus 3, which, since it's the same thing, is a perfect square. For perfect squares, let me give you a little hint. It's x plus or x minus whatever little value you get inside of here. And if you look up above, see how I wrote x minus 5? That came from this minus 5 right here. That's a little shortcut. You'll appreciate that shortcut when we actually begin solving. Well, I have 3 of them. I shortened up the notes, but I tried to kind of condense them so that we practice this thing 3 times, and you'll do it 3 times whenever you do your classwork as well. Now, maybe you're like, I think this one factors. Well, great. If you think it factors, then you could try to factor it. If not, let's go ahead and let's give it a shot on our own. Okay. We are going to follow these steps. And I do not believe that does not factor, so you would never be able to factor this. Let's go through these ugly steps together. There's 8 of them. So this is how to solve if you can't factor. You move the constant to the other side and the x's to the left. So that means in this problem, I need to add 19 to the other side. That is going to give me x squared plus 4x equals a positive 19. Step 2, Divide by what is in front of x squared. In this problem, there's just a 1. So if I were to divide by a 1, it's going to give me the same thing. Eventually, you will see problems where when you divide by something, it changes. Step 3. It's time to complete the square. So in this problem, we have to take 1/2 of the middle value, which is b, and we square it. That gives us 1/2 of 4 is 2, and we square that. That gives us 4. Hold on to this number because we're going to use it in the next step. Add that new value to both sides. So I'm going to have x squared plus 4x, and now here it is. We're going to add this 4. We're going to add it here. Remember, it equaled 19, and to keep our math problem in symmetry, we have to add 4 here as well. Now, hopefully you know this is going to equal 23 when we add it. Step 5, factor the left side into a perfect square. So we are going to skip the box and the grouping method altogether, and we're going to factor this. I'm going to teach you a real simple way to do that. The square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 4 is 2. This middle sign drops down. Notice this 2 matches this 2 from step 3. If you don't believe me, you can do the box method, but I promise you will get x plus 2 twice. And now that equals 23. Once you get this far, your problem is almost done. Step 6, take the square root of both sides. So, step 6, I'm going to take the square root of this side and the square root of that side. And on the big sign right here, make sure to use plus and minus on the right. The square root of this binomial just means that the squared goes away. I end up with x plus 2 equals. There is no square root of 23, and none of these numbers in here goes into 23. Like 25 does not go into 23. 16 does not go into 23. Neither does 9 or 4. We don't really care about 1, by the way. So I'm going to write that it equals the positive and the negative square root of 23. Notice I am not using decimals. Step 7. Add or subtract the value from the left. So we need to solve for x. So we're going to do minus 2, minus 2. We're on our final step now. We write x equals, because those cancel, this negative 2 plus and minus the square root of 23. Yes, there are 2 answers there. There's negative 2 plus the square root of 23 and negative 2 minus the square root of 23. Both of those answers are the solutions to the problem up above that did not factor. We're going to try it again. I'm going to pause the video though and open up a new one.